Welcome to the latest episode of Learning with Success, the show for parents of school-aged children, sponsored by Success Tutoring Online, helping students with academic advancement for over 20 years. And I'm your host, Armando Salcido. Today we have a very talented artist named Brad Fraunfelter, who is becoming very well known for his science fiction and fantasy paintings and illustrations. A number of his pieces have been published in Imagined FX magazine and Advanced Photoshop magazine, and in several how-to books, including a Fantasy Art Now book by ILX Press. Welcome, Brad. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, thanks.
Very good. Now, before we get into some of the your work and some of the techniques you use to create your pieces, how did you originally become interested in art, and specifically in the creation of art for science fiction and fantasy?
As far back as I can remember, literally when I was in the sixth grade, way back at that time, I already had an existing interest in art, and specifically fantasy and science fiction art, and it was just there from the very beginning. But I was very much influenced by comic books. I love to read comic books, and to me, the artists who did the comic books were like real masters. They were masters in anatomy, in perspective, and how to draw faces and hands. And those are difficult things to draw. And comic book artists, to me, were like true masters. So I loved comic books. And for me, the ones that I liked the best were the Swamp Thing and another one called the Man Thing. Those were my two favorites. And they were also very well written. So I love those things. And that's what helped me get interested in fantasy and science fiction art.
Now, while we continue our conversation, I want to bring up on the screen the portfolio from your websites to show our audience some of your work. Sure. That way they can see what I'm talking about when I say, and I really do say this, I think that some of your pieces are really just really stunning.
Thank you.
Some of these pieces are now on the cover of various books or book series in the genre of fantasy and science fiction. Now, can you say how many different book titles have covers that are made by your artwork or that have your artwork?
Well, I just finished about 2 weeks ago. I just finished my 135th book cover project.
Wow. Okay.
So it usually runs between 12 to 15 covers per year, something like that. That's like generally on average.
Wow. Okay. So you do about one per month or one every 3 weeks or so?
Roughly. I try to do that. I don't always make it in that time frame. Sometimes they take considerably longer, depending on other projects that I might have going at the same time, or if it's a very complex design, yes, it can take longer. Yeah.
So now, how did you get started with creating book covers for science fiction and fantasy books?
Well, that's an interesting question. I always knew that I wanted to be a book cover artist. I thought that if I got my art on one book cover, that would be fabulous. But I did want to be a book cover artist. So what I did was, the first thing that I did was I went to a local bookstore. I went to the science fiction and fantasy section, and I found all the books. I looked for all the books that I thought had very interesting covers that I would like to do myself. And then I wrote down a list of who the publishers were. That was my first mailing list. But there is one thing that was very interesting. One day I was at a chiropractor, as a matter of fact, and she asked me. We were just talking, like she was asking me what I did, and I said I was an artist and I wanted to do book covers and that kind of thing. And she said, "Oh, I have another customer who's interested in getting a book cover done." And so she gave me the person's contact, and we connected, and that was the very first book cover job that I did, um, which was a referral, and it came out very well. The client absolutely loved it, and as a matter of fact, I submitted it to a magazine called Advanced Photoshop Magazine, and I couldn't believe it, but they gave me a 2-page spread in their magazine. So that to me was like the ultimate uh, fun thing to have happen. And that was my very first book cover. So I was very fortunate.
Now, during one of the times that we spoke about you possibly coming on as a guest, you mentioned that one of the key things to creating many of your art pieces is your knowledge and application of how to study and how to communicate. Now, those are pretty basic skills that people use or should use all of the time. So, what do you mean by that, and how do you specifically apply those skills to your work?
One thing that's very important when I first get someone who contacts me, I ask them for any detailed information that they would like to give me about what they want to have on their cover. There's a lot of research involved in that, and sometimes I have to do a lot of image research if I'm going to paint something that I've never painted before. For me to be able to communicate what the author wants, it's vital that I completely understand exactly what their concept is, and that means doing research. That means like understanding all the terminology that they're using within their book or within their description. And if I get a perfect understanding of what they're communicating to me, then I can duplicate or get something that is exactly what they're looking for. That very first book cover that I did, and then one of her comments was something like, "Well, this was exactly what I had imagined. It was exactly what I had in my mind, and it was almost like you read my mind." And I wouldn't have been able to do that if I didn't have a complete understanding and had done full research on all the data that she had communicated to me about.
Wow, very good. Now, let me ask you this here. If a student wanted to become successful as an artist, would you say that it is important for that student to do well in all of their academic subjects, including math, science, English, in addition to specifically studying art? And if so, why? So, how would studying and doing well in all of those subjects help a student to become successful as an artist?
Being an artist is a very technological field. It's got a lot of technology involved with it, whether you're a writer or whether you're a fantasy illustrator or a musician. Each one of those fields has a lot of technology in it. So you've got to learn, like just if you're a fantasy artist, for example, some of the things you need to know about are lighting, perspective, color, composition. There's all these fields of technology for the artist. But if you don't have certain basic like English, science, math, those are subjects which you need for life in general. Those are key to just round out anybody's education.
That's good because I know that sometimes I do, in speaking with students, sometimes they'll say, I want to be a singer, I want to be an artist, I want to be a musician or baseball player, let's say, or something like that. And they figure, okay, well, I don't really need math, I don't really need science. But it's been my view, and I'm glad you said that, because it's been my view that the more knowledge you get, the more you can utilize in whatever it is that you're going to be doing. And it just kind of helps out with whatever you're doing.
That's very true. That's absolutely true. I would agree with that 100%.
Earlier, you mentioned that you sometimes build sculptures to help capture the light and realism of something that you intend to put out. Now, why do you go through the trouble of building a sculpture or creating sculptures, and why not just paint the concept directly from your imagination right onto the canvas or the computer screen?
My particular style, the style that I personally have chosen, is like very realistic. I like to do images that are ultra realistic, that look almost photographic in their realism. And I was trained in photography, so I use a lot of photography in my in my images as well. But I've tried to paint like characters or creatures freehand, and then one day that I thought maybe I should try sculpting this, and then I can take a picture of the sculpture and then use that in the illustration, and it worked beautifully. So if I'm trying to create like a dinosaur or an alien or something like that, I'll do a clay sculpture of it, and I can get as detailed as I want down to the texture of the skin. And then what I can do is I can take the sculpture, I can set it up in like a studio sort of photography setting. I can set it up with lighting, which will match the lighting of like what I want the background to look like. And when I take that approach, I find that it ultimately gets something that's very realistic. So for me, sculpture works beautifully. It gives me something to look very lifelike. And then I can take the photograph of the sculpture and bring it into the computer. And then I can add whatever coloration I want to add to it. I can make fine adjustments to it. I can warp it, and very useful for my particular approach.
Well, very good. And I'll tell you, I've noted several times, and I've told you on some of the pieces that I've seen, your handling of just the lighting and the colors, I find just absolutely amazing. What I'd like to do is I'd like to change from streaming your portfolio to showing some examples of how you create your pieces using sketches, models, sculptures, and lighting. Now, can you walk us through these different images and let us know how they relate to the final art piece, and if possible, your thought process as you create the piece?
Yeah, sure. This was an original idea that I had. I was developing my portfolio, which I'm always doing all the time. And I just wanted to create a dinosaur battle. And two of my favorite dinosaurs that are very common are the Tyrannosaurus Rex. There's another one which is kind of like an armadillo. It's called Ankylosaurus, and it's got a club tail. And I thought it would be a great idea to draw these two dinosaurs battling. But I first had to sketch it out. So I started with an original concept sketch, placement of the dinosaurs. I wanted to make it fairly detailed. And so I started with an original concept sketch, which you can see there. And I used that concept sketch to sculpt from. So I had the sketch in front of me as I was sculpting. I made a separate head sculpture of the Tyrannosaurus Rex, as you can see in the upper right. And I also sculpted the body sort of separately. So I had those two sculptures. And then I did a third sculpture of the Ankylosaurus, which is the creature that sort of has the spikes on its back and that kind of thing.
I think on the next slide, I think is when you have all together. Let's see
Yes.
here. When you put it all
Yes.
together, I think it's
Yeah.
actually very cool.
Thank you. Thank you. I wanted to make the Ankylosaurus look sort of menacing and challenging to the T-Rex,
Right.
but I wanted to make them look sort of equally challenged. So I kind of made some modifications to the Ankylosaurus. So I made the spikes longer to make it look like this dinosaur could be able to challenge the T-Rex, even though he might be smaller.
Very cool. So tell us about this sculpture here.
This was a book cover project. It was for a series of books. I did all the covers for a whole series called the Petrolist series. The main character could ingest stone, and it would make him transform into creatures, and this being like one of the creatures that he could transform into. And he was
Now, while you're talking, I'm going to switch back and forth between your sculpture and the actual art piece. Okay.
Oh yes, yeah. That's the final result. The creature was supposed to be emerging from like a volcanic hole in the earth. I first started with a concept sketch where I worked out the details of the beast and how its skin would look. I tried to make a very detailed sculpture, and I tried to make the skin sort of look rock-like, like lava. As you can see in that sculpture photograph, I wanted to make the creature look like it was coming out of a volcano. So I took an orange light and lit it from underneath.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, so let's go on to this next one here. Now, well, I'll let you talk.
This was a book cover project for incredibly prolific author. I've done he's written an enormous quantity of science fiction and fantasy books, and he's had me do the cover for every single one of them. So it's been a privilege to do book covers for this guy. This is the main character. A lot of times I use hired models. I will hire a model So you can see here the original concept sketch. Yeah, this is the finished book cover, the final result. And this is the original concept sketch, which I started with. I use that sketch to pose the model. So the sketch is sort of like the foundation. It's the template that I use. I'll try and make lighting which matches the color and the lighting of the background. So I had to set up some lighting which would match that background environment that she would be in.
Very
And
cool.
yeah, that's kind of my approach.
All right, and then so
And then the bubble that's around the bubble that's around the woman, that was generally hand painted to make it sort of look like there was an electrical field around her that she was generating, like through magic coming through her fingers.
the magical force field there.
Yeah, exactly.
And here we have again concept sketch and your finished art on the right.
This was another portfolio piece. One day I had the idea to create a zebra-like huntress type character. I wanted to create something that looked like the two animals were working together. And that's why I called this piece, it's titled Symbiosis. That means like two animals that work together for the benefit of both of them. So these kind of zebra girls that are they're riding the back of this creature. They're using the creature to help them hunt. I used a model, and she was wearing sort of like a tight sort of bodysuit. I was able to use that and then apply like zebra stripes. That large beast, that was totally hand sculpted, and then all the coloration and detail was done digitally on the computer using Adobe Photoshop.
Very good, very good. All right, let's go here now. So here again, another concept sketch, and then the actual sculpture.
Yeah, the author wanted me to create a very evil looking dragon. So this was my conceptual sketch idea of something that would look very evil. I wanted it to make it look like almost like the skin was like rock. I decided to make the interior of this dragon look like it was glowing. I did the sculpture using the sketch as a reference, and then I took small lights like flashlights and shined them inside the mouth to help get a realistic glow inside the mouth. This was a very fun project. There was a lot to it. There was two creatures that I had to add to this. One you can see here, which is the sea creature. There's also a dragon, which is in the upper portion, which you don't see here. Much of the coloration and fine detail is painted in on the ship, the glowing lights on the interior. But that took a lot of many hours to create the ship itself, and then also to build each of the sculptures, which were then photographed and then digitally painted, as far as like all the coloration and the fine detail is like digitally painted in for the creatures and the ship.
I really get the idea, which is really good. Is I mean, to create the realism and the actual final piece, there's a lot of work involved.
Very much. Yeah, this is the sculpture that I did of the dragon, which is in the sky of that work. So yeah, there you can see the finished the finished version, which is in the upper right part of the art piece.
So it's not just have an idea and go and just paint it. It's like you build the sculptures, you do the lighting, you get it, and that's how you get the actual lighting. Like I said, I've really been impressed the way you handle the lighting and the colors. Just, I mean, I think it's amazing. So
thank you very much.
Now this guy probably was very fun to create.
Yes, he was. The title of the book, this was a book cover project. The title of the book was Demon's Design. So there had to be several ghouls in the background, and this is one of the ghouls that was in the background of this book cover here. And here you can see the finished image. Again, I wanted to get very realistic looking ghouls, so I started with sculptures.
I mean, like I said, I know it's a lot of work, but it really looks like a lot of fun. I happen to be a fan of sci-fi and fantasy, so I really like this. Now,
Thank you.
so this is the start of another one, which you told me about. So tell me about this.
I was hiking one morning, I believe it was Thanksgiving morning, and I saw this. I just hiked above a fog layer, and the sun was just rising above the fog layer, and I happened to have my 35 millimeter camera with me, and I took a picture of this, and this was my inspiration for a fantasy art piece, which is called Lost City. And what I saw this, and I thought, oh my God, this would be great to show like an ancient city, which is like jutting up through the clouds, and the sun is coming through the clouds, and then in a distance, in a fort in the foreground, there would be a guy looking at this from a distance. Those two photos are just reference photos that I used
Oh,
to help create a design for the lizard that I wanted to use in this.
and I see this is the actual sculpture of the lizard.
This is the actual sculpture that I did. I used the reference photos to help with creating that sculpture.
And then, and here you have again a model, and then your two additional sculptures that you added to the finished piece.
I wanted to have like a dome structures in the background that were jutting through the clouds.
And I see here you've got the actual sketch that kind of superimposed on top of the cloud photo.
Yes.
And then I guess on the right now you've got the model, and now here you put them together.
Yeah. So this is the rough concept sketch that I started with. From that, I did the sculptures and the photography of the sculptures and the model, and then I started putting all these elements together. Here you can see the detailed finished product. I also painted in like this sort of leather headpiece that the lizard is wearing, and those are connected to the sort of like the reins that of the rider is holding. To the right is some of the details like the birds that were added, and the waterfalls, and that's
very cool. I mean, looking at the actual final piece is just I think it's just gorgeous. And this is just the top portion. So here's the whole piece, which is a little harder to see because it's large. But this is I think it's, like I said, I'm a fan of this type of work, of the art, and I think it's really very cool.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is all pretty amazing. Now, in addition to creating book covers, you mentioned that you are now also doing some film work.
Yeah, that's right. Very recently, I began promoting to special effects companies, and there's a lot of them here in the Hollywood, Burbank area. And I've always dreamed of working in the film industry. I decided to start promoting to special effects companies, and what I was hired by a company to do something called matte painting, and that's a technical term. And so that's what I do in the film industry. What it is matte painting is a very detailed background image, which is digitally painted, and it gets inserted with live action of a film. So, for example, if you have a team of like a shoot crew, which is on a location, and they're shooting like a country type of landscape, and the background, let's say the background has in the center of this landscape is like a modern day buildings or maybe skyscrapers, but they're filming like, say, a medieval story, and they want the entire landscape to look like it's a medieval country village, or maybe no modern buildings at all. They have to be completely wiped out. So they hire a what's called a matte painter, and what the matte painter does is he he digitally paints something like as a fill-in, which will fill in the scene with what the director wants.
Now, I know that a lot of the studios have very have all a lot of like restrictions on you can't say this and you can't say that as far as who's worked on this or whatever. Are there any films that you can say that you've worked on, or is that a no at this point?
Well, what I can say is that I've worked on a number of Disney films, and I've
Okay.
worked on Lucasfilm projects. So
Okay.
I think I'm safe to say those things. I don't know if I can give actual titles, but yes, those two studios I have done work for. Yes.
Very cool. Very cool. Now, so if a student wants to become or wants to pursue a career as a successful artist, what would you recommend that they do?
Well, there's a number of things that are very important. A key one is having a good portfolio. You've got to develop a good portfolio that shows like a body of work. A good way that I found to approach it is to I found other artists that I admired, and then I read books on how those artists did things. I also found I researched how other artists who I admired, how they approached their own techniques, and I just practiced. And you just got to practice and practice, and that's how you develop your own style. Start doing projects for other people. Whatever interests you, that'll help to gain experience and help you to build up pieces that you can add to your portfolio. And I found that taking that approach, it worked very well for me, and I was able to gradually build up a strong portfolio and do work for other people at the same time. And it was also very much a learning process all along the way. So I did a lot of study, a lot of my own personal study and research, and then after all that, I sort of like just practiced, and that's how I kind of developed my own individual style.
Very cool. Well, as I said, I really find your art pieces fascinating, and it's probably because I really like the genres of science fiction and fantasy. Is there anything else that you think our audience may find interesting?
If you have a goal or dream, never give up on that thing. There's different types of criticism. There's constructive criticism, which is very beneficial. If you get criticism from like other artists or other professionals, and it's constructive, take that advice. It's generally very helpful. Also, what an artist can sometimes get though, sometimes they can get destructive criticism, and that's the kind of criticism that you want to ignore. Ignore the destructive criticism. It's generally when you get that kind of thing, it's not helpful, and it won't help you improve the quality of your work. But constructive criticism is very valuable. But if you have a goal, don't give up on it. Always, just pursue it, and you can always attain your goals if you really want to.
Exactly. I tell students that all the time. Never give up on your dreams. Study, learn everything as much as you can, but don't give up on your dreams. So
that's very true.
Well, I'll tell you, this has been very, very interesting. I really want to thank you for taking the time to show us some of your work and share your thoughts with regard to art and how studying and being successful as a student can help someone to become a successful artist.
Thank you very much, Armando. I really appreciate it.
Sure. Okay. And I want to thank all of our listeners and all of those watching on YouTube for joining us today. I tried to make sure that there was as much audio description as possible for those listening to the podcast, but to experience the full impact of the artwork, you probably, or you definitely should watch the show on YouTube. If you liked today's show and you haven't already, please subscribe so as not to miss any of our scheduled upcoming interviews. Thank you again, and we'll see you all next week.
Thank you.
As mentioned at the beginning of the show, Learning with Success is sponsored by Success Tutoring Online. Our administrative offices are located in Burbank, California, but we provide tutoring or academic advancement to students throughout the United States.